Bullshit.
It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich, CEO of Massolutions, the world's only no bullshit marketing firm. Today, I'm recording from the West Coast where we have clients and Massolutions team members in California, from the Inland Empire to Long Beach. My special guest today is Dr. Kyle Smart, one of the shareholders and the Chief Medical Officer for the Cucamonga Valley Medical Group. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Dave, thanks for having me.
We're really excited to have you. We have had the opportunity to get to know you and the other shareholders here at CVMG, and really happy to have the chance to talk. You know that I mentioned to you before we hit play and record that the first question is always to get everything rolling, and it's the same one for everybody because I love to hear stories about leadership and communication. So talk to me about your career path, your journey.
Well, my story is not unlike others. I am a Gen Xer. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I come from a construction background, and the way that my dad got me out of going into construction was to put me at work. Starting my first day of summer after I finished sixth grade, and I worked every summer roofing between junior high and well into college.
So you learned a lot about manual labor and the nuances of roofs.
Yes, absolutely. That was a way that my dad motivated me to study hard and work hard, and it paid off. And obviously, college in 4 years, and then on to med school. And
where'd you go to med school?
I went to Western University of Health Sciences here in Southern California, Pomona, California. I did my residency at San Bernardino County Hospital, Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, and then started a practice after finishing that.
What I found interesting from getting to know you and Dr. Rami Mawjood is, well, first of all, you guys went to school together, which I found very interesting, and then last night we're out to dinner and another physician comes walking over that you guys hadn't seen in a while, and he also went to your high school. So I said, this is a high school that's churning out some physicians. What I really like about what you two have done and the other shareholders is you took a practice and started to build it and grow it, and you're really focusing on leadership and communication, which is why I think it's so important for us to do the show. Talk about your first couple of jobs and when you realized that you had some ability and desire to kind of run the business side in addition to providing care, which you still do both today.
That's a great question, and that's so many ways I want to start answering that. So I think that my entrepreneurial bent comes from watching my father go from, just manual labor and a lot of work to actually, starting his own business, taking that leap of faith, starting his own business, and the work to make that successful. So as we know, as shareholders and owners of companies, we are often doing a lot of the groundwork up to the high-level admin work. So that's probably where that comes from. But let me just say, I can attest, doctors are the worst business people. Okay, we learn through trial and error a lot of things, and then we made a lot of mistakes. And in growing through those, we've surrounded ourselves with a great executive and administrative team. We have great shareholders for them right now. Another important thing about being a physician that I realized early on is, we're congratulated the first day of medical school. Congratulations, 15 other people wanted the chair you're sitting in, you made it, and there's this very competitive nature in the whole process. And when I finished, I realized, that, again, a lot of doctors think they're at the top of the food chain, they're at the apex, and I realized, holy cow, that is not the case. Insurance companies and bigger entities switch us out like entry-level employees. And that was pretty humbling to realize. And then that's certainly modeled the way we manage our practice here.
Was your first job working for like an HMO, or were you an individual practitioner, or were you already in a group your first?
Another great story on a bad experience and why we run things differently at Cucamonga Valley Medical Group. I came out of residency. I worked for a guy who put his arm around me and said, "You're my partner," and what in quotes, and what he really meant to say was, "You're my employee," but he used the word partner. And when I started acting like a partner, he was very offended. I reorganized some things. I made some changes to the patient flow. I kept asking him for some office space, and when he didn't give me one, I just moved a desk in there. And boy, it was just hilarious because I really took him at his word that I was a partner. And of course, I hadn't signed anything. I had no shares or equity. I was really an employee, but I didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we use those words very intentionally around here.
So that position is your first job.
Correct.
Immediately after that one, do you realize I'm going to start my own practice, or do you start doing a little bit of, like, I know you do ER shifts now still and urgent care shifts. Did you start doing that kind of stuff while working in this first job, or did you go try it on your own completely? What was the next step?
Yeah, the timing, we had some good partners from the beginning, the local hospital and some other groups. And so the timing of where we were going to launch our practice wasn't quite there. So I filled in until we launched our practice. I filled in with this other job, with working in the ER, working in the urgent care. But when it was the green light and we were able to launch our first clinic, then that became the full-time
And was it
priority.
the 4 shareholders that are still there today that were there at the beginning?
We had 4 shareholders at the beginning. Two have moved on, and then 2 have remained as original shareholders, Dr. Maljude and myself. And then we've added 2 more since that time, Dr. Jesse Dominguez and Dr. Kimberly Beckemeyer.
You mentioned earlier that one of the things you thought was maybe leads to bad business people, I should say, for physicians, is that trial and error is used a lot. And I think that can be good in business. Talk to me about business being similar and also business being different from practicing medicine, because I know physicians are data driven anytime we're trying to communicate with physicians for any other client, because some of our clients are out to reach you. They're out to reach physicians. We've always said they're data driven, get to the point with some facts and move on. How is that trial and error? Was that trial and error embedded in your DNA from being a physician, and then it's different, when you apply it to business it can have more pratfalls, or are you practicing business different than the way you practice medicine?
So one of the big tools that I've learned and has helped me, and maybe this will come up later, is behavioral assessment, which is different than personality assessment. So we use a behavioral assessment called the DISC assessment, and the D and the I and the S and the C stand for various different behavioral types. My behavioral type is very wired for physician, and I have had to learn a whole new way of processing and a whole new way of behaviors and skill sets to be a successful administrator.
Give me a couple examples.
That's a good one. Okay. So I know that I'm an SI, and that's great for patient care because I am very empathetic and compassionate, and I get in the trenches with my patients and really help them solve their problems. And it's not just the medical problems. So I tell students all the time that I work with, it's more than just being a good provider these days. You have to help patients navigate the healthcare system, this crazy atrocity that we have in 2019. And so when I say I get in the trenches and help patients, it's certainly to manage their medical issues, but it's also figuring out insurance and what kind of insurance they have, Medi-Cal or Medicaid, an HMO, a PPO, and then which medications are covered, which aren't, where do we send them for x-ray or lab, what specialists can they see based on the insurance they have. We used to think of PPO as carte blanche. You can't get an MRI anymore with a PPO insurance unless you jump through hurdles that we used to only think applied to HMO, such as an x-ray and physical therapy before an MRI. But it's navigating the psychosocial things for patients as well. In the business arena, I think the D and C part of the behavioral assessment I find that most of my colleagues that are CEOs and run businesses have high levels of D and C, and I have some dominant or D in me, but I can't stand C. I color outside the lines and bend the rules all the time. So.
Mm-hmm. So the C stands for conformity?
Compliance.
Compliance?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's entrepreneurial, though, to color outside the lines.
I think so, but yeah. I drive rule followers crazy. So.
And how is your CEO now? You were CEO of CVMG for years, and now you've moved into the Chief Medical Officer role. And Rami, who was on the show about 6 months ago, is the CEO now. How is he different from you on the behavioral aspect?
That's a great question. The move of our administrative roles was very strategic. We have always collaboratively run the company. Again, all shareholders, but really I would say Rami and myself at the helm. It was never meant to be a forever job. Again, we try to be humble, we try to keep the ego in check, and we felt that changing the role of CEO would really help keep things fresh, keep different eyes. We both have different strengths and such, so he brings a whole different processing pattern, behavioral pattern, and DISC assessment than I did, and it's been a good transition. We did it nice and slow over 24 months, but it's ultimately serving the company well. And so we still collaborate on very high level things, but he can focus on that CEO stuff, and I can focus on the medical side of things. So it's been really a positive step.
You mentioned that when you had the chance at a young age to work with your dad in the construction roofing business, that it had an impact on you from the one standpoint that it encouraged you to go and get as much education and specialization as possible because you didn't want to have more of a rote, laborious type job. But then you mentioned that you did learn a lot from observing how your dad took it from small to bigger and formal business. Other than your dad, who are some mentors or a mentor that has impacted you with their leadership and their coaching, and what did they do that might help our audience?
Man, you're asking all the good questions right now. An easy one for me to think of is Dr. James Martin. He was a tenured basic sciences professor at the medical school that I ended up attending and getting into, physiology. And so like a lot of young, optimistic students trying to get into medical school, I had developed an application. I had certain things checked off the list that to help me get into medical school. And one of my deficiencies was research, come to find out. And so I reached out to some of the academic professors at the local schools, and Dr. Martin happened to respond and took me under his wing and gave me a lot of mentoring and coaching and helped me fill in some of those deficiencies, certainly helped me with research. And I think that's how I really got my foot in the door at Western. And we've remained friends all through medical school residency and after, and still talk to this day. But he definitely saw the potential, the diamond in the rough, if you will, that I didn't. I think I had it all. I thought I had it all right then and there, But he helped me to see some of those foibles and deficiencies, helped mentor them up, was patient with me, and it's been a great relationship. And so, how could that apply to your listeners? It's identifying that talent and having the patience to mentor and coach somebody long term to get them to be their best version of themselves.
Well, let's talk about the other way, because I know that now that you've been in a leadership role for some time, talk about not a specific person, but talk about how you have noticed a person, you saw some talent in what you did from a mentoring standpoint that's led to some successes for you here at CVMG?
Absolutely. Giving somebody constructive feedback is not an easy thing, to have that hard conversation. But as leaders, I mean, that's part of the job description. And we both are part of Vistage and training, and we have talks about this all the time. And so again, for some of the people listening, they're going to think, what is this guy talking about? That is the easiest thing. They're probably high D on that DISC assessment. And, they're ready to fire anybody, anytime, any place. But again, I think it takes a little bit of a softer hand to what message do you really want to send to that person, and how much are they assuming that you want to coach this person up. It's messaging that person in a way that where you use personal examples, you really are clear about the behavior you need changed and what you're going to do to help them change those behaviors and the value for that person to do that. And so that again is a series of processing steps that I've learned and been coached on, rather than just assuming people know how you want it done, assuming they know what they're doing wrong and what they need to do better. Can I give you another example?
Absolutely.
Okay. So early on running a practice, and when I was the CEO, you feel like you're at the top, the apex. And it's very stressful. I tell people all the time, put your shoes put yourself in the provider's shoes just for a half day. They've got an overloaded amount of patients. And it's not just those patients coming in to see them, they've got phone calls and messages now to respond to, possibly emails, faxes. They're being hit from all kinds of different directions. So the things that a provider has to do in any given half day, I'm not even talking about a full day, a half day, isn't just the patients that are on their schedule. There's exponentially other things coming at them, patient care issues, rather than the physical presence of a patient in the office with them. And I was having one of those days. It was very difficult. I was getting hit from every direction. Every time I'd walk out of a patient room, I'd get hit with 3 other things. And I made the assumption that my staff knew the stress that I was under. And that was a bad assumption to make, because one of my great staff came up to me and said, hey, I have a patient, they need, etc. And I just looked away from them, put my hand up, talked to the hand, and walked into my office and just kind of finished what I was doing. And was that the message I wanted to send that staff member? Absolutely not. The staff member was only trying to help a patient, a problem that was landed on their lap, and it was rolling uphill to the provider that was in the office at the time, which was myself. And I had to pull myself off the ledge and calm down and realize, the poor message I had just sent that staff member who was only trying to help me and help a patient. And I had to go back out there and tell them, my perspective. I'm overbooked with patients. I'm running behind. I've got phone calls. The hospital's calling. I've got, a lot of things going on. You just added one other thing on. So I do want to get through this day, and we will all get through this half day, but I need to just take things one at a time. And so learning to take the time to communicate with the people who are trying to help you, rather than just assume they know what I'm going through at that moment, has become a key part of the way I try to get through day to day.
That's a powerful message. I just had with someone on my leadership team today, something where I was lame, and I did tell her that, because I did the exact same thing. Swamped, tired, and you just blurt something or email something or text something. What happened with that staff member? Were they forgiving and was everything okay, or did they like quit 2 weeks later?
No, absolutely. They became such a wonderful part of our team for many more years, and until they transitioned out. And we have a great relationship to this day, and it became a positive thing. And we joked about that whole morning and my reaction for years to come.
One of the things I want to touch on that is important to leaders, and I am vulnerable on the show and in Vistagen and with my team, but this is really important because leaders are human and are going to make mistakes, and we're going to be shitty with someone unintentionally, and we're going to be short, and we're going to be impatient. It doesn't make that right. But when you have someone who is of high character and cares and is dedicated to you and your cause, that's what happens. That person understands it, talks through it with you, you work through it, you stay, and you still stay close to this person. I just want to talk about that for a minute, because I think that what I used to beat myself up for was when someone would get really frustrated about that or whatever and not forgive you. And I'm not claiming I do that every day. I don't make that mistake every day or every week or every month probably even. But when you do that mistake, I found earlier in my career a couple people took it way too personal and I beat myself up. But then years later I realized, no, I was being a human and they weren't forgiving. So that's on them, because I forgave them 100 times when they did something. So talk about that a little bit, because it's a thing that I think leaders often aren't forgiven.
That's a great point. So, Dave, we've gotten to know each other, over the last year and a half, right? So I appreciate your humility and your vulnerability. As leaders, there's some innate passion there, and that passion can swing to the positive or to the negative. And I think when we're less developed or less mature, that the way that passion swings is driven by our emotions and the kind of day we're having, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I have found is that a lot of staff will hang with a good leader even though they've been exposed to the positive side of that passion and the negative side of that passion, right? The positive side is actually so great that it'll allow them to tolerate when we don't show up at our best. But being the kind of leaders that want to be the best version of ourselves, we take time to get training, hear seminars, get a coach, go through DISC assessments, and we work on those kind of things so that we can change our behaviors. So a real measure of any leader and employee, in my opinion, is what's their pattern of behavior. So you're right, everybody has a bad day, everybody makes mistakes, okay? And so are they willing to receive feedback about that and ultimately change their behavior? People who defend and deflect, they need to be coached out. They need to be shown the door. They need to go be successful elsewhere, whatever you want to call it. But people who receive it and actually work on changing those behaviors, leader or employee, those are people I want to keep working with. And so a good leader, in my opinion, will always be working on bettering themselves, becoming the best version of themselves, making it where day to day that positive passion and leadership and energy shows up and not the negative one. And that's what I find people will follow you to the end, and especially a leader that's really trying to show up as the best version of themselves for the organization day in and day out.
That's really powerful. Again, a couple of these things you brought up are so meaningful to both employees listening, to people that are employees that are freelancers in the gig economy, to other leaders, to owners, operators, to CEOs. These are meaningful because the human condition is there for us all. We have to be able to look in the mirror and get better, but people have to forgive leaders as well.
Absolutely, and not to get existential or too out there, but we have a choice. It is harder work to choose positivity than the default. And good leaders choose the harder work, and they lead their companies to success.
Agreed. Speaking of leadership success, that is one of the things I ask anyone that's a guest. I say, the show's really about leadership and communication, because often I'll ask someone if they'd like to be a guest, and they'll say, yeah, sure, I enjoy talking with you, but I don't do a ton of marketing. Well, first of all, they often do more marketing than they realize, but I say it's really about leadership and communication. Give me a success as a leader, that something that you're happy about, that you look back on and you say, you personally grew, people you were leading grew, and it just was a exhilarating experience, because I think those kind of real life stories help others that are in leadership roles that can apply them.
So we decided to start a practice right before the recession, the big 07, 08 recession. And as CEO, I was able to take the company from near bankruptcy to being an extremely profitable company into the 2012, 2013 era.
So the first thing is you go and you start, and you don't know that this recession's coming. You're not an economist, and a lot of us were hit by surprise. So you end up starting at a time that isn't an opportune time to take a big risk, and you work through it. So you have this company that's not doing well, and you're able to make it survive, and then you get some growth, then you go into maximum growth. So let's take two different scenarios. The first one is you had the company that wasn't doing as well, and you saved it to the point, you and your team saved it to the point that it started doing well. That's story number one. We're going to hear maybe three things you would tell the audience. This is what I did when the bottom line was not looking good and we were all nervous. Then you get to where you're stable, and now you go through some massive growth in another 3-year period. So those are two different stories that maybe you can apply. Maybe it ends up they're the same things applied to both, but maybe it isn't. Let's go to the first one. You're in the recession, you just start out, so it's already the toughness of starting a business. The vast majority of businesses don't survive year 1 or 2. Your year 1 or 2 happens to also be a recession. Tell us what happens and how you turn through it.
So part of our success is we started practices in unsaturated areas. And so we start this new practice in a great housing market, great housing area, and the recession hits. And all those great people we were servicing, the teachers, the cops, the fire, the young professionals, they're gone. The recession just was devastating back then. And so you surround yourself with good partners. So again, we had the local hospital, we had another great insurance company that we were working with, and you identify the needs in your area and you adapt to meet those needs.
What are some of the ways you adapted? You mentioned that you had great partners, which I totally agree with, and you mentioned the hospital, and you mentioned an insurance company. Then you said, and you find ways to adapt by looking at the market. What were some of the ways you adapted during that recession?
So we accepted revenue streams or insurance companies that weren't a part of our original business plan. So you just expand your revenue streams, even cash patients. We created a very affordable cash rates for people because I thought to myself, these people still need health care, whether they have insurance or not. So how can we make it affordable for them during the lull when they don't? Because I want them to be my patient if they have health insurance or if they don't, because this recession is going to end. They're going to have health insurance again someday, and that's going to be the long-term play. And so we developed multiple different revenue streams, even on a cash basis.
Let's talk about that, because that isn't a simple thing to do in healthcare, because there's different insurance plans say they have like the old most favored nations clauses, the way they used to call this 20 years ago, where if you give this lowest price, you have to be able to give that same price to an insurer. Medicare has some regulations and so forth. How did you do the cash business that was able to meet all the standards, but also didn't have someone that was paying a copay on their insurance think, well, why'd that guy get the same thing for $30 when I had $100 and paid a $10 copay?
That's a very fair question. So there's a lot of regulations out there that help protect that, and we didn't violate any of those, but we just came up with payment plans We'd waive a charge every now and then if we needed to. And again, I can control my costs of what an office visit is. I can even control medication wise. Again, what was it? $3 prescriptions or $12 prescriptions for whatever 1 and 3 months. Those were unheard of before the recession. But that's again an example of pharmacies doing things to maintain patients. My point is that I could control the cost of even pharmaceuticals a little bit if I prescribed generics as opposed to name brand, if I gave samples, et cetera, et cetera. Things that, you're right, are out of my control are how much labs cost, how much x-rays cost, how much hospital, ER, or admissions cost, et cetera, et cetera. So what we did is we collated the different vendors in the area, and we would give patients a choice.
That gets you through the recession and the near dire straits, and where you're teetering and tottering, saying, are we even going to make it work? Then you move into a phase where you're stable for a while, then you go in this growth phase, which you're still in now. But what were the tenets of the growth phase of the past 2 or 3 or 4 years?
So the foundation of excellent patient care that we had developed during that time of the recession, and then combine that with what we talked about earlier, we realized we were not good business people, so we surrounded ourselves with great executive coach, Lisa Rios, and other consultants who then helped us with HR, helped us with branding, helped us with marketing, helped us with reproducible systems and processes, so we could fund and match the growth that we are going through based on that foundation.
Brings me to a point that I've ranted about and written about that I am perplexed by, and you guys have overcome this. Time and again, I see people pay for advice, but then ignore it. And it sounds to me like during your growth phase, you were paying for advice and applying it.
That's true, and I think that comes back to the humility factor. And again, all of the partners that I work with, all the shareholders I work with get that. We don't have we're not the smartest people. We're really good at medicine, and we're really good at applying that to the patients we're blessed with that walk in our door, and we're really good at navigating this healthcare industry. Again, this 2019, where we're at and how we got there. The reality is patients need care, and so it comes back to humility. So we realized what we're good at and what we're not good at. And we're really good at providing care. We're really good at navigating the healthcare system that is in America in 2019 and that reality. But it never occurred to us to invest in our own business acumen and not do what we were being trained to do. And so, yeah, I guess we just took to heart and trusted those consultants and made those changes and did those things in our business that have led to that success as well.
The point about humility means a lot to me because I hadn't thought of it that way as much, that when someone isn't taking advice that they paid for, subconsciously it's a self-esteem issue, and we've all been there. I can speak to that myself. I mean, the first few years of Mass Solutions, I was so focused on wanting to be a certain thing that you couldn't have told me anything, because I just said, I don't want to be that. I'm leaving that to become this. And it took me years I still listened to advice and things like that, but I wasn't as open because you had blinders on. And until you said that about the humility, I think that I'm going to remember that next time someone says they like an idea but then doesn't do anything with it, it's something where they are in their place self-esteem wise.
That's how I would assess our success in using the coaching and the training that we've received.
Simon Sinek's book made a big impact on me. As I was reading it, I thought, boy, this really makes a ton of sense. Every leader of a company needs to make sure that they understand their why. But I thought it's only half of the 2 why questions. The first why question is your why, your reason for being. The second why question is your customer's why, their reason for buying. The answers to those two why questions won't be exactly the same, but there will be some synergies, and you can take those two why questions, get the answers, and turn those two answers into one big idea. With Cucamonga Valley Medical Group, your big idea is treated like family. Talk about what that means, because to some it might be, oh, it's obvious they treat people like family, but talk about the multiple ways that that big idea means so much to you.
Another great question. So let me say two things to give a foundation for my answer. Number one, we spent a lot of time, part of our success has been the time we've spent on developing our culture. And our core philosophy, the first answer to that question of why, is life, love, and compassion. The shareholders got together, and this is why we exist. This is why we formed this company, and this is going to be a reflection of us. So life, love, and compassion. Number two, it's such a privilege to do patient care. I wish I could share with other colleagues that own businesses in the non-medical, our staff, what goes on behind the door of a patient visit. You're invited into such a sacred and personal space. A lot of amazing work goes on there, and it's not just prescribing medications or health. It's really being invited to walk with somebody, patients, through some very difficult times, and that's a privilege. And so you combine that culture we've created, and you combine what we do and experience on a regular basis, and so treated like family comes from that. Patients treated like family. All patients treated like family, just like I talked earlier in the podcast. Cash patients in the recession treated just like the highest possible insurance, treated like family. But it extends to each other. Our colleagues treated like family. We're not going to dump on each other. We're allowed to have a bad day. Let's talk through that, and let's be a better version of ourselves next time. Staff and employees treated like family. So it's not just, providers that get this certain level of attention. It's our own staff treated like family. It's vendors and the people that use us and partners out there. And so the treated like family is an extension not only of what we do on a daily basis, but the culture we created.
I think you guys also showed us that you have generations of families. So the grandmother, the mother, and the granddaughter all being treated like family by you guys. So you have that whole generational thing as well.
Absolutely. The byproduct of this kind of behavior in a medical setting is they're going to bring their whole family to see you at this point, and their friends and their neighbors and such. And it works against you too, because if you don't do it right, then they're telling all their family and their friends and their neighbors about the bad experience they had.
Great.
So you got to be able to work through both of those.
I love the way you tell that story. It really does help encapsulate what CVMG is all about, treated like family. Couple more questions. The next to last one is, I'd like to ask about a tool that the guests use that help improve their productivity or help improve their communication or their leadership. I give examples, like one person talked about how Slack improved things for their communication amongst their company. Had another person talk about a time management system that they use. Another person talked about a fitness app that they use. People have talked about ways that they've become stronger by joining Vistage or joining something like Strategic Coach. You mentioned earlier DISC, but since you've already done DISC, what is another tool that you use to help with your leadership or your communication or your personal growth that might help our audience?
So you're not going to let me talk about DISC? Okay,
No,
because I was going to say, let me highlight two real quick.
Sure.
We've spent a lot of time on DISC, so we don't need to do that. But I can't. Again, I'm been doing this for about 12 years now, and I'm frustrated sometimes. It takes me so long to get some of these things through my head. But the catharsis and revelation of not everybody feels and thinks the way I do. Not everybody feels and communicates the way I do. And it just shed so much light on why, even though I was being the best person I could be, why I would drive certain people crazy. Just the way I was just wired. And so DISC helped me see a lot of that and helped me learn how to communicate with different people much better. The other thing I'm really talking up right now and has made an impact on me is, and it's not to be too wordy, but tell the story. You have to tell your own narrative, because if you don't, people will make one up, and it is often not given any benefit of the doubt. So a lot of times in decision making or strategy or taking a company in a different direction, a leader and the executive team have gone through steps A, B, C, and D. And we roll that out to the staff, we go right to D, the final step of the process we went through. And it just causes so much dysfunction, and this may seem like such an easy thing, but I've seen so many problems we've created for ourselves and so many other problems I've helped people work through because they just didn't take the few minutes to tell the story, to tell the narrative about how we've gone from A, B, C, and then roll out the final step. And that would be another coaching tool I'm very hot on right now and talking a lot about.
I like it. So the last question is kind of two parts. Number one, first part is, was there anything you thought I would ask you that I didn't? And then the second part is if you just want to close with anything you want to add.
I think you asked a lot of great questions. Certainly stimulated me and helped me, again, articulate the difference between practicing medicine and running a business. So I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of the podcast. I hope that it's been beneficial for you and your listeners. And I thank the world of you, Dave, and look forward to many years working together.
Thank you. That's feeling is mutual. I'm really enjoying working together. So glad you were able to do this. It was a West Coast recording where I'm out here this week with multiple clients, and also our West Coast presence in Long Beach. Allie and Millie are superstars here from the West Coast, part of the Mass Solutions team. So I was excited to do the remote recording with Dr. Kyle Smart of Cucamonga Valley Medical Group. Thanks for being on the show. To our listeners, thanks for listening to the No BS Marketing Show. We love when you give us any kind of reviews, so if you can take a minute and 12 seconds to go ahead and post something, it helps give us the constructive feedback to get better. If you would like a weekly No BS Marketing fix, go to massolutions.biz, B-I-Z, and sign up for that. And remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.